Good morning, friends. For more than a decade, it has been a special pleasure for me to welcome guests from throughout the community to our annual breakfast, remembering Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and honoring his legacy. For 27 years, the Delaware community has come together to celebrate, to sing, to learn, and to support each other on this day. Now, after all that has happened in the past year across the nation and here in Central Ohio, this is the year when we most need to come together as a community. And so it is worse than ironic that today we can only gather virtually. Nevertheless, it is imperative that we stand together in spirit and in commitment. We must stand together for health and safety against a pandemic that has killed nearly 2 million people around the world and close to 400,000 Americans, including a disproportionately rate of people of color. We must stand together for democracy against threats we thought America would never see. We must stand together for justice. On this day, when we remember a man slain for the color of his skin, we must stand together for George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for Casey Goodson, for Andre Hill, and for so many more who have died on our streets and in their homes. And together, we must work for change. Last summer, we created the banner you see behind me with a message suggested by one of our 2020 graduates. That banner continues to stand at the Sandusky Street entrance to our historic campus. It is an everyday reminder for our entire community. Next January, we will once again meet for this event on the Ohio Wesleyan campus as we resume this great tradition. Yet it is more important that we commit to stand together every day, and it is more important that every day we work for change. It is more important that every day, and especially on the darkest days, we remember the words of John Lewis. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. Our struggle is not the struggle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. It is the struggle of a lifetime. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble, ends the quote by John Lewis. Every day, we must commit to do the work to bring those words to life. Thank you for joining us for this virtual event. I look forward to meeting with all of you again soon.
Please bow your head and pray with us. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for the leadership, life, and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We thank you for his dream of wanting the day to come when his 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. God, we still have that dream in the year 2021. By your power and your might, we will continue to work for this dream until it becomes a reality for every person. Thank you for those whose names will never go down in history books, but they stood for godly equality for all people. Thank you, God, for the Delaware Community Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee, Ohio Wesleyan University, and Delaware community coming together to honor justice and equality for all. Lord, we pray for peace and healing, both spiritually, physically, all around this country and this world. Be with the panelists and give them the words to inspire us to make the needed transformations in our community. God, we honor the work that has already been done in our community. Help us not to grow weary in doing good. Inspire each one of us to be agents of change in every aspect of our life. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Today we acknowledge that the land we currently work, live, and play on is land that the Delaware Lenape were forced off of. We honor their lives, their work, and their loss.
Hello, I'm Jen Rui, a member of the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee and chairperson of the Scholarship Committee. In light of the cancellation of the community breakfast due to COVID, the MLK Committee would like to thank Ohio Wesleyan University and the panelists for making this recorded program available for our community. We appreciate the community's ongoing commitment to the MLK Scholarship Program, which supports students who exemplify Dr. King's dream through their actions and their work. This past year, the MLK Committee awarded $3,000 to deserving students from Delaware County high schools. As you may know, these scholarships are primarily funded through proceeds from the community breakfast. Without that source of income for this year, the MLK Committee is accepting donations to directly support scholarships for the 2021 year. If you would like to make a contribution, please send a check made payable to the MLK Celebration Committee and mailed to the address below. Thank you for your personal commitment to further the ideals of Dr. King and for your consideration to support our youth in their quest to fulfill this important work as well.
Today is a day that the nation recognizes Martin Luther King Jr. as an icon of democracy and one of the leading figures of the modern civil rights movement. However, it was not until 1986 that it was made a federal holiday and took folks consistently fighting at the local, state, and federal levels. This is a moment for us to think through the legacy of King, but also all of those who are actively fighting for equity and justice and against racism and anti-Blackness. Many times we are taught about Martin Luther King through a whitewashed lens, which allows us to forget that King was controversial, radical to some, and ultimately assassinated. We also need to remember that in his early moments with the Montgomery Improvement Association, that folks like Joanne Robinson and Rosa Parks were instrumental in ensuring the success of the bus boycott, or that Bayard Rustin, Ella Baker, Dorothy Height, and A. Philip Randolph were vital in the helping of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom come to fruition, or that Stokely Carmichael, Malcolm X, Shirley Chisholm, Angela Davis, members of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense such as Huey P. Newton, Elaine Brown, and Bobby Seale, and so many others who have been intentionally erased from our historical narratives. Our discussion today is going to have us thinking through what grassroots activism looks like here in Delaware, Ohio, and how so many are still actively working towards dismantling oppressive systems and fighting the impacts of racism and anti-Blackness in their daily lives. Our panelists will be sharing their thoughts on the legacy of MLK, the civil rights movement, and the way forward. Our panelists are going to introduce themselves, and then we will transition into our discussion.
Hello, I'm Francine Butler. I'm a Delaware City Schools educator and a performing artist.
Hello, I am Carrie Joy Coit. I am the Executive Director of Unity Community Center, and I have been active in the community fighting the fight for the underserved population for over 20 years.
My name is Rochelle Pride, and I've had the pleasure of serving in the field of juvenile justice and advocacy for the past 12 years. Currently, I serve as board president of Unity Community Center in Delaware, Ohio, as we come together on a regular basis to join the fight for our community.
Hi, Jason Timpson. I am the director of the Office of Multicultural Student Affairs here at Ohio Wesleyan. I use he, him, his pronouns. And my sphere of influence here at the university is I work with training and workshops for our students. I am in charge of our campus climate reporting system, which allows us to take in reports of biased or problematic incidents or language that are happening in our campus community, as well as overseeing support centers, which includes our Women's Resource Center, Spectrum, which is our LGBT+ center, as well as work with global majority students.
Hello, I'm Tamika Vinson-Reed. I'm the co-chair of the Delaware African American Heritage Council, where we work to expand, include, and elevate the present and historical contributions of African Americans, both on the local, state, and worldwide level. We also have a special project called the Ujima Consortium, which is really dedicated to social justice issues, policies, and practices.
Thank you all. And my name is Dawn Chisebe. I'm the interim Chief Diversity Officer for Ohio Wesleyan. I also teach in our Black World Studies Department and our Women and Gender Studies Department, and I will be moderating the panel today. So our first question for the panelists, Martin Luther King had a dream. What are some of your dreams for racial justice and equity?
I'd like to answer that question. I want justice to be, like not just us. It should be fair for everybody. I did see a BLM sign being carried into the Capitol halls, and it was ballot legitimacy matters. And I said, we've been saying that since the 14th Amendment. So when you make the laws fair for everybody, you make it fair for everybody. And that's what justice should look like. It's fair for all, not some people favored over others.
I would like to answer that question by stating a quote that was brought about by one of our well-known civil rights leaders and activists of the time of MLK. And that's where Malcolm X speaks to the idea that I am for truth, no matter who tells it, and I am for justice, no matter who it is for or against. When I think of racial justice, I think of that very quote, because it's not a this or that, it's a who, a why, and a how.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Don, can I just jump in just to say, I think, both Francine and Rochelle really illuminated justice, meaning that it is for all. And I always say my quote is justice is not a destination. It's an ongoing commitment. It takes all of us, unlikely allies, co-conspirators. It takes all of us to reach this place of beloved community. And that beloved community looks like equality for all. So it's having the same opportunities, the same ability to achieve success. It's making sure that there's equitable practices so that we all feel like we belong and we're all beloved.
One thing I hear you all connecting is that these are all active processes that need to continue to move forward constantly. And so thinking through the ways that these are verbs, right? This is action. This is something that has to be done in order for us to kind of continue to have some sort of forward movement. So Martin Luther King had a variety of people around him that one would assume are people he trusted and felt safe with. Who do you call when you feel unsafe?
So for me, I have been lucky enough to have a community who keeps me grounded and uplifted, right? And so for me, I think those are the folks that show up for me when I need it, right? I know I exist on my grandparents' prayers and love, right? I have been lucky enough to know 4 of my great-grandparents and 4 grandparents, 2 of which who are still with me. So for me to be able to call, have conversations, cuss, fuss, scream, cry, pray, I think those things have been useful for me. And then trying to figure out where my community is and how that continues to change with people who are really invested in my success, right? And so I have lots of brown and Black folks that I can call and say, this racist thing happened to me today, let's talk through it. I have been lucky enough to be in relationships with white folks who want to do better and be better. And so I've cultivated those relationships where there are times that things happen in the world and they will call or text me before I can even pick up my phone to say, hey, this thing happened. Are you good? What can I do? Right. And I've even been lucky enough to be in relationship with people that say, this stuff that we're going through has got to be better. So we don't have an official way that we, enact reparations, but here is my white community. Can you give us your Venmo? Can you give us your Cash App so that we can run you some money because we know that you're doing good work? And so for me, I think those are the people that keep me safe and help me to move through this work, right? And those are also the people that I can go to and say, I'm tired today. And they are willing to say, cool, rest, right? For me, I have been able to work with a therapist. So I wanted a therapist. I have found a Black female therapist, and she has been amazing for me. And so we talk every week, and I can just give her all of my stuff, and she can help me think through those things. And again, I think those go back to being able to touch my entire community, right? And so again, I tell people I'm from the South, and in the South, they say, well, Jesus got it, Jesus will fix it. And now we can have a full-up conversation of Jesus will fix it, and I got a good therapist who would help me unwrap some of these things too, right? And so for me, I think that community has been vital in keeping the faith and keeping moving forward in this work.
I'll jump in on this one. When I need to feel safe, I actually contact my sisters, my best friends, my sisters. They're very active in the community, and they're all active in the work. And I have one particular sister that's really big about mental health. And doing social justice work, social action work, whether it be even fighting against abortion, anything, it becomes very exhausting mentally. And so I find safety in being able to do exactly what Jason said, being able to have a conversation and being vulnerable and saying, I'm not well, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. These things have taken a toll on me. I have been tired and exhausted for a good 15 of the 24 months that I've been in Delaware. And at the same time, and I can say for my physical safety, which I have been concerned about in Delaware, I talked to a couple of leaders there in regards to where they felt, Caucasian leaders, and where they felt the temperature was at in the community. And being encouraged to be comfortable with carrying a CCW, and because there's concerns with that, just being an activist in Delaware, you have to be concerned with your physical safety. It's not just your mental safety. So I think that every last one of us, I know the 4 women on here, we've all been, you know how they do the little passive aggressive threat of, you need to be careful, or you have a person telling you, don't bring your big city ideas to the country town, and things of that nature that we get told in meetings. And those are the passive aggressive threats. And so when we get down to physical, safety, it is a concern. There's not really much to go to. I don't feel the people in this community feel safe to go to the police officers or the sheriff's office and say, hey, I don't feel safe. And that's unfortunate, and so I don't know what to tell people when it comes down to physical safety, but you gotta pray to Jesus and peace be still.
And that's real. I want to just tap on what Carrie Joy said. That's real. When you are in the sphere and you are disrupting, disorganizing, and dismantling a power dynamic, that is threatening to people who hold those spaces. And so you have to be real, assured, and intentional about why you're in this space, because you are going to need that village, whether it's the therapist, your sister girlfriends, your sorority sisters. You're going to need all of it, because it's not only, again, you're positioning yourself in a very precarious way, but it's extremely exhausting to fight. And you have to, I know we'll talk about probably self-care later in the conversation, but it is so true to just make sure that you have those reinforcements and that support. And I lean on my faith heavily. I think about when they marched across the bridge in Selma in '65, and when they, weren't riding the buses for 381 days I think about all those instances where those folks had to lean on something higher than themselves. And for me, it has been my faith, of course, my family, and then other co-conspirators, all these sisters and the brother on this panel. We've got to lean on each other. So certainly when you decide to be in this space, have support. It is so important. It really is.
Yeah. I think some of the things, again, that I've heard you all saying, yesterday there was a Black-owned bakery in Columbus that had to shut down because of racist threats. And immediately I saw the community come and say, let's Venmo some money. Let's do pre-orders. Let's figure out how to make this work. Some people were offering security with the bakery, right? Like, what is it that we can do in this time because this has happened, right? Also thinking about, like, Black feminist scholars who all talk about the importance of sisterhood, right? And what that means and what sisterhood looks like, particularly for Black and Brown women, right? And how important these connections are, whether it is those fictive kinship relationships, right? Or, you know, whatever those kinds of relationships look like. And then immediately I started thinking back to Fannie Lou Hamer, right? Saying, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? And what this means, right? And how this is reflected in everything that you all are saying in this moment. So what are some of the things, or what are some of the most important lessons from King that we can use to face the current situations, right? So what we're living through in this moment.
I would like to speak on that. I think some of the most powerful lessons from King that I have picked up and just admired so much as it relates to him is his level of selflessness and his consistency to be persistent. A lot of times we get wrapped up in a cause or the call to action and what is necessary in order for us to make the change, but we start, but we sometimes never get to the finish line. King never stopped. No matter the onslaught of racial injustices he faced independently and collectively with those that he marched with, those that he served with, his selflessness to know that this cause was greater than him. The purpose of what we were fighting for at that time was so much bigger than who he was. And there was never a period of time that I personally felt, as I read his literature and his him being the amazing orator that he was, as you listen to those speeches and you listen and you read his memoirs, nothing about what he did was of a selfish connotation. It was all about the greater good of his people and what we, in educating us on how we fight and what to do. So the community activism part that we talked about here briefly, figuring out what that looks like, he was able to put that not only into words, but into practice and in action consistently. We have to finish what we start. We have to be consistent and persistent about what we believe to be most meaningful to us, for our people. And whether or not it's for our people or not, again, justice it goes both ways, no matter who it's for or against. One thing that Carrie Joy had even said, you know, in many of our conversations that we've had that I thought was very profound, is that we don't own the struggle, but we are clear about what parts of the struggle we do. And we need to be clear about the parts of the struggle that we don't and figure out how we fix that too. It's a collective and persistent effort for all aspects of this, because social justice takes all of us. You know, it actually would be better for some of our non-melanated individuals to understand life would be better for you too if racism didn't exist. Life actually would be better for you too. It wouldn't be a situation of just we feel that, but guess what? You wouldn't feel this. And whatever this is, whether it's that comfort zone, that bubble that you're in, that privilege, that entitlement, I'm telling you, things will be a lot better on the other side of the mountain too. It's not just our fight. It's a fight for equality and understanding, first of all, that equity and equal are two different things. Okay, that's first. So let's get to the basis of understanding what equity looks like and what being equal looks like. It's not one and the same. You know what I mean? When we riot and protest because we're being killed and you riot and protest because you didn't get your way, I'm sorry, that we're not the same. There's two different connotations that have to be understood before we can move forward as community leaders and as a community period in what this fight really looks like. So I know I went off a little bit, but as far as MLK, that selflessness and that persistence to say, to do, and actively put out those things that I just described is what's most compelling to me and why I have been, you know, just in love with who he was and who he continues to be for our people.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. You go ahead, Ms. Francine.
Thank you. The selflessness, that and the persistence, excellent points. I would also say the organization. I mean, this was landline phones and handheld flyers, but there was an underground network, there was a church network, there was a radio station network. I mean, the Children's Crusade, there were coded messages in the songs that the DJ chose to air. I mean, it was just amazing. And Bayard Rustin was a big brain behind all of that. And that the way they got their organization and their communication going, that was a big thing for me.
Absolutely. I think, I think it was Tamika earlier that was talking about the bus boycott, and then Rochelle just brought out this idea of needing to get to the finish line, right? And the bus boycott is the perfect example of that, right? Because folks were protesting for longer than a year, and every time a court case was decided, everybody was like, okay, get back on the bus. And they're like, no, that hasn't come to fruition yet, right? Then the next court case was decided, and they're no, it hasn't come to fruition yet, right? And so until that moment where it came to fruition, nobody got back on that bus, right? So no matter how many court cases were passed, no matter what happened, they still walked, right? They still used the coordinated transportation networks through everything that they were facing in those moments. I think the other thing that Rochelle brought up was the idea of equity, right? And for me, Trevor Noah has the best example of that in his book, right? When he says, folks say, if you give a man a fish, he'll only eat for a day, but if you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. And he says, but that completely ignores whether they have a fishing rod or whether they have the bait, whether there's water nearby, whether that water has fish in it, right? And we're thinking about equity, all of those things have to happen in concert with one another versus just teaching someone how to fish, right? And what that means as we're kind of moving through thinking about what these differences are between equality, equity, justice, and all of these kind of terms that we're using.
King was a student of history. I mean, many of the lessons that he used in this country, I mean, he saw how well they worked for the Mahatma, the Satyagraha movement, and how they got out from under British domination in India, Yeah.
Well, and again, I was just going to say that is what King has taught me, right? And so part of that lesson is the movement was happening before him, right? The movement was a part of his life and his journey, and the movement continues after him, right? And so I think that's the part that I can't forget is it wasn't just Martin and his dream, right? There were people, you had to have Ella and Septima and Bayard and Huey and all of those folks who were a part of it, right? The people that we know, the people who have been intentionally left out of history, all of those folks were a part of the movement. And I think the other thing that is important for me in thinking about the legacy of MLK is the thing that I think about with all kinds of Black folks, right? So when we think about our founders in the Divine Nine, when we think about folks in the Black community, is that we have a way of creating these people as saints, deities, or giving them their halo. And so the difficulty for me is that we forget that they were whole humans, right? And they lived a whole life. And so when we get to see these folks as human, when we get to see Martin as a man who did some of these great things, then we can see ourselves in that movement as well, right? And so I think those are the pieces that I don't want us to forget or to not mention fully, because again, when I can see Martin as a man who did great things, but also lived a full life of things that we talk about and things that we don't, and rumors that were had, right? It allows me to be able to say, well, in my whole humanity, in my flawedness, I can be able to step up and lead movements as well, because I can see myself in these folks, right? And so I think those are things that I want us to be able to pull out of these conversations as well. The movement didn't start with Martin and his dream, right? It didn't end at his assassination. And we all have the power to lead and to make sure that we are continuing to move our community forward.
Yeah.
That's interesting you say that, Jason, because I think also motivated by that with his frailty and flawedness, there was an amplification of love that led him. Like, I believe that you can't lead people that you don't love, that you don't care about. And so I think with this movement of love that was in him, that he knew that love, it holds you accountable. Love tells the truth. Love doesn't exempt you from having to sit down when you make an error, right? And be restorative, right? Repair it and do it right the next time. So I think there was this sense of just this love for humanity, for people. And I think that drove him, because you can't put your life on the line for something that you do not truly invest in. And so I really think that he was driven by love. And I think the other point that I wanted to make, and I think Francine, you said it, that organization, like I can appreciate the collection of people around this screen, right? Because it's not going to be just one leader in one organization that makes this all happen. It's going to be all of us coordinated efforts working in our respective lanes to make this collective movement happen. So I can appreciate that he worked with SNCC and he worked with, the Southern Christian Leadership. Like, he worked with a network of organizations to make this stuff happen. When he came into town, there was a coordinated group that he had to connect with to create that collective pressure. So I can appreciate the love that led him, but I can also appreciate the organization that kept it going.
Yeah. And he also, I think, which is really important to note, was learning, which is part of what Ms. Francine mentioned earlier, this international connection that he had, right? And that lots of folks in the movement had, right? So he, in fact, I think it was the week before he was assassinated, had just met with Kenneth Kaunda, who was the first president of independent Zambia, thinking about the freedom struggle there, right? Folks were meeting with Sekou Touré and Kwame Nkrumah, and like all of these folks who were also involved in the independence movements abroad, right? And thinking about what those coordinated efforts could look like, as well as the Caribbean as well, right? And so all of these spaces were really pulling together in these really intentional ways and learning from each other, right? Which is something that I think is really important as we're moving, is thinking about what people are doing in other spaces and how we can coordinate those efforts in these really intentional ways, which I think kind of can transition us to the way that activism looks here, right? Like, so activism in Delaware, what is happening in Delaware? What are the organizations? Who are the people, right? Like, how do folks get involved? What does it look like to participate in this kind of grassroots activism here in Delaware?
I will say that what it looks like is what we create it to be, because you have people who have different philosophies, of course, and belief systems. Values, beliefs, and attitudes are huge anytime you begin to bring a group of people together to achieve a common goal. So it's first identifying, like you said, who are those key players, and how do we put the message out to make it something that is open, something that is inviting, from people from all walks of life. Again, this is not one independent race or one independent situation that we take on. We understand the cause, we understand the root of it, but in order to encompass what we want to achieve as a community, we understand that Delaware is a red county. It's dominantly white. So we got to understand that along with us, it's going to take those power systems in other areas that may not look like us to be able to be a part of what we're trying to accomplish here. I think it's also reiterating that silence is violence. So as much as you don't say is as much as you do say. And so when we understand that what we choose not to address because it's uncomfortable, or because, oh, well, that's not necessarily my lane, or that's not necessarily, I don't know what to say to that. Well, you need to say something. Depending on who, what, when, and how, it needs to be addressed. When we look at our governmental structures here in Delaware, we understand that most of those entities are represented by non-melanated individuals. So it's how do we get them to come to the table as well, to understand that this is something that we're doing that is going to take everybody, no matter what level you're on, no matter what position you sit in. We need to focus on the collective is how we move forward. And again, making it something that's not your issue because it doesn't speak to you directly. One thing that I know is that unless those who are not impacted feel is more outraged than those who are, nothing's going to change. Okay. I believe Mr. Benjamin Franklin told us that eons ago. If those who are not directly, affected, if they don't see that because it's not in their purview, it's not in their lens, but they're as outraged as those who are affected, that's only when change is going to really manifest into what we want to see. And in a dominantly white county, we got to be clear that we're going to have to make sure those around us are just as outraged as we are. And nonetheless, I don't think that should stop the movement. It's just being clear about who needs to be included in that movement and stop giving people the option to do nothing.
Jump in, because I'm a little bit different than Rochelle's approach. Yes. I'm a little bit different than Rochelle's approach. I think being the executive director of Unity Community Center, we have many issues because we're dealing with the aftermath of the systemic racism. We're dealing with the children that are affected, the adults that are living in generational poverty. We're dealing with hunger issues and things like that. So being the executive director, I have to pick a lane because I'm in so many that there's no way. We were talking about exhaustion before. This is the reason. Because if I were to pick everything, it would just, where would I be? And then I can't give a full focus to something. So one thing that I will say that I like all the partnerships that, and I know Ms. Reed will speak to this in a second, that she's been able to bring together. I also feel that because I'm working throughout the entire county of Delaware, my goals with Unity Community Center is we're working on trying to bring businesses into Delaware. So we were looking at calling the people to the carpet of this is what you say you want, this is what you say is okay. Well, I'm going to do everything in the process and put it in front of your face. And if you still tell me no, then we have another conversation. So it's like we were able to get the first minority roofing contract with the city of Delaware. And then I found out today they had to pull out. And it's so disheartening because there were so many requirements for them that are not typical requirements for them in Columbus or in Franklin County. So here it is, we have another issue. Your system is set up to not allow minority businesses to come in and to start. So for us at UCC, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make this a better place, respectfully, unified, and where there's access, because that's the one thing that I can say with every type of movement. If the people don't get access to the resources they need to survive, then we have a larger problem. And so that's what we strive and fight for. As far as the organization, we work with a lot of churches. We work with a lot of churches here. We work with everybody. So that is an upside and a downside. Being in a center promoting unity, we work with everybody. So even when we work with the groups that people are against. So we've had people show up at our events to receive candy with Confederate flags on. I'm not going to not allow your child to get candy because you have an offensive thing to me. Now, it was a bold move. I'm not going to lie about that. But I think that that's a great part of Delaware County is that it's very difficult to be on both sides of the coins, but everyone here is very intelligent, and we know that we have to convey this message in a way. This is more of a Martin mentality town than a Malcolm mentality town. And I feel that it is unfortunate because I'm more of a Malcolm mentality individual. I didn't really take much from Martin Luther King except for passiveness and what he did for the church. But I did take away that he was willing to go to jail for his cause. He was willing to go to the extreme. He was willing to die on that bridge for his cause. And so that's where I'm at with that. But I think that all the groups that come together, the churches here are very strong. The city of Delaware have their choices on who they want to work with and who they don't want to work with. The county commissioners, the city of Powell, Westerville City, they've all reached out. We're doing something, but the goal is to get it more integrated, to get business more integrated, to get contracts more integrated, to get the vendor list more integrated, to get housing more integrated. And so those are things we're working on because those are things that are going to help the underserved population in Delaware, which is growing. Growing tremendously. Is actually, we're at 113% growth of people who need services just through Unity Community Center in a year. So that number is showing that people are surviving barely. So I'll go lead out.
And if you're working for affordable housing, everybody benefits from affordable housing. I know students that I work with that have had to move, their families have had to move out of Delaware because they were priced out. Some of them still want to attend Delaware City schools. And for the students in the Delaware City schools, we have at the high school level, we have the social justice book club that the students read literature and discuss these kinds of things. We have the African American Student Coalition, and other groups that have to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have a group for the teachers as well. And they did book study and small group talk this summer, and they're continuing to do that through their work. On the artistic side, we've seen the Ross Museum host many community forums where the community gives their input to an artist, and we get these wonderful murals on the front of the building and around the town that grew out of people's concerns about the town and their dreams for making things better. And when Carrie Joy talked about King and Martin. She was referring to the King and Malcolm. Malcolm and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. That's what I'm trying to get to, that she was talking about. And both of them put their families on the line. I saw Yolanda King do a one-woman show about the impact of her dad on 3 separate women from 3 different walks of life. She played every character. And I mean, this is a young lady who probably spent a great deal of her childhood watching her dad on TV because he wasn't home. He was traveling everywhere, and probably put this show together by everything she researched about her father, who was taken from her, when she was in her younger years. Now Yolanda's no longer with us, but I sure hope somebody would bring back that one-woman show that she put together, because it was awesome. And also with the artistic, through artistic expression, you can get a lot of these things out into the community in a way that is palatable. We had a production of Hairspray in the community, which talks about interracial unity and moving forward. We've had non-traditional casting of things like love letters. We've had now the Historical Society is putting together a cultural communities program. So we'll see more of the early Black settlers and the indigenous populations of this community. So I think the arc is bending. People are leaning into it, but it does take a collective effort.
I wanted to jump in real quick, obviously, because a lot of work that we're doing is centered around finding your lane and what passion you have to make change. And I think that's part of it, is identifying what are the things that you're passionate about? What are the things that, you get upset about? And I think one of the things that I've kind of stepped back in my advocacy so I could clarify why I'm here. I always ask myself the question, why? Why are you here? And I think Rashad Robinson from Color of Change had talked about moving from the unfortunate things that happen and seeing them as unjust. So yeah, it was unfortunate that the Flint water crisis happened. Actually, no, it was unjust. So it's not about fixing the unfortunate things. Sorry that these things are happening to Black and Brown people. No, actually what's happening is unjust, and we need to fix it through a structural and policy position, right? So it's not about, charitable solutions. I'm just going to send water to Flint. No, it's holding people accountable to why that actually happened. So it is not about charity. It's about, this is unjust. And this is happening to people, brown, Black, otherwise. It's affecting us all. And so moving from that, again, unfortunate, to the unjust piece is where I'm hoping that we can use, organizations like the Heritage Council and Ujima, who is specifically focused on that structural policy issues, to getting people to move in that space. So, through the Ujima project, what we've done, we've asked the city, and Carrie Jo, I'm glad that you disclosed that you had a roofer on the line and lost him. It's unfortunate, but part of what we asked the city to do was, one, we wanted representation. You have to have diversity in and of itself is great, right? My definition of diversity is, anything that makes a difference. It is a difference that makes a difference, right? That's diversity. But to have substantive inclusion and equity is where we want the city to move towards, right? So if that looks like expanding who you do RFPs, requests for proposals, and how do you outsource work to, organizations that you've traditionally not engaged? How do you expand the workforce working for the city? How do you have representation from folks who look like all of us around this screen? So we asked the city, we, as we say, we didn't call them out, we called them in to say, hey, because when you do this type of stuff, it impacts and it benefits everyone, right? That is the whole point of equity. We all win, we all succeed. And we have to start, again, moving people to, this is unjust stuff that's happening. It's not unfortunate, it is unjust. And we have to respond. So again, we've used the council, and we've used Ujima to move that forward. But we have to start thinking in that lens. We can't fix it. We can't fix structural inequity or inequality with charity. It just does not happen. We have to change policy.
I think Joy brought it up a few moments ago, and then I think everybody's reiterated it in some way, shape, or form. But there's different approaches, there are different methodologies, and when we put all of those together, right, then we're able to work towards change in more tangible ways. Thinking about, folks love to put King and Malcolm as kind of like the antithesis of each other, when in reality they're working towards the same goal, right? They're just working via different methodologies. Same thing with SNCC and SCLC. I mean, Ella Baker leaves one and goes to the other because she wants to focus more on this grassroots organizing, right, versus the kind of top-down model. But thinking that we need all of those, right? Like we need the top down, the bottom up to eventually get to the middle in some way, shape, or form. And so the other thing I heard when you all were talking about Unity Community Center was that the resources that are needed, right? And it made me keep thinking about the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense with breakfast programs and clinics and like all of those things, and how you all are providing a space to have that as well, right? To get resources to individuals, but how eventually those things need to be built into policies and structures, so that we're not relying on a single space to do the work, right? That it becomes part of the work for the entire community in that way. And so when you all are thinking about the work that you're doing, and kind of some of the things that you all are thinking about was like how folks can be a part of this, right? So what does allyship look like with your organization? What should and could people do, right, to kind of help with those tangible changes that need to be made? And what does it mean to be an ally in this moment?
I'll jump in, and I want to say something too. I think that when we use the term grassroots, I hate that fact that when we talk about social justice, we want to say grassroots. We're beyond grassroots. These roots have grown. They're fully matured. We've been here. Unity Community Center, formerly known as SWCI, has been around for 15 years, and the like Jason alluded to earlier, this fight was before King, is before us. So the social action and social justice movement is not grassroots by any means. And I just want to kind of go back to that just a little bit. But as far as being a part of UCC, we have volunteer forums. There's mentorship. There's feeding people. There's clothing. There's, if you name it, we find a way. If you just think about everything a person and an underserved population is going to face, whether they help with utility bills. We resource people. And I think the biggest thing that we're facing as an agency is the awareness to Delaware County that you have this population growing, and care coordination needs to happen, because they actually need people to help them fill out their Medicaid forms. And these are things they never had to do before. And so you have this growing population, and then we have an agency who's trying to do it, but then we don't have the funding to fully pay for the staff members to do that. 77% of the volunteer staff members are under the poverty line at Unity Community Center. Over 50% of the volunteers are seniors. So we're missing an age group of people that are going to take this seriously. And I'm pretty sure that's with every organization. It's like there's an age group of people who are just like, come on now, don't let this pass you by. Don't let these opportunities miss you by. And so I am excited with the way we find a place for you. It doesn't matter what you want to do. We will help you help others. I will find out if I have to refer you to the agency or however the case may be. So with Delaware County as a whole, we are trying to do our best to be very inclusive and allow anybody to come in and participate. If they want to volunteer and mentor, they do have to pass a background check, because we don't want any of that stuff going on over there. They do have to pass the background check, and then the training with me is very intense as well, as far as how you serve, because there's a lot of things we got to break down, a lot of isms that we have, and we have to recognize our own isms to be able to go out here in this community and really get the work done. I always tell people, they say, "Oh, I don't have any isms." Okay, that's not a person I can truly have a conversation with, because if you're not honest with yourself, if you don't have any isms, then we're not going to get very far in our conversation. So we do work on trying for those people to get past and through their isms, whatever isms they may have. We do try to do that too. So that's what we do, what it looks like for us.
I mean, I think when we're thinking about um, racial allyship, right, it's about white people taking an honest look at how they exist in the world and what they're willing to do to make changes, right? And so I think when we don't often have a full conversation about what it means to be an ally and what folks can risk. But I think we need to have a conversation about like what that looks like and how people are willing to put themselves on the line and thinking about what that has looked like throughout history, right? We know that there are lots of white people throughout history who have actively lost their lives as a result of trying to make life better. Right. We also know that there are people who have lived and existed. So Joan Mohollander is a member of Delta Sigma Theta, was a woman who was a part of the Freedom Rides, right? Her story didn't come out until she was, near retirement, and her kids were like, "Wait, you did what?" And so for me, I think those are folks that I want white people to look to as guidance to be able to say, "What am I willing to risk? What am I willing to put on the line to be able to move life forward in ways that are useful?" Right? How can you interrogate the things that you're doing in both active and passive ways? And what things can you do that are big things, but also are there small things that you can do, right? One of the new phrases that is going around is microactivism. And so microactivism looks like you are in a meeting and something racially problematic has been said. What do you do in those moments, right? Your family has a Confederate flag on their wall in the living room. What do you do and how do you have those conversations? Because I think those things are important as we're thinking about activism. And the last thing that I will say is this summer, a friend and I were having a conversation about kind of the process. And it's one of the things that we work through here at the university of there are 4 points when we're thinking about how you show up in this work, right? And so when we're thinking about some of the things that happened this summer, the reason why it hasn't sustained for some white people is because they went from awareness, this thing is terrible, into action, I'm going to do this thing, right? But they didn't have full conversation or understanding as to why I'm engaged in this thing and those skill building. And so the thing that I would share with folks is you start with awareness. This thing happened. I am unsure what to do or how I'm thinking about it. Then we get into knowledge or education, right? So I'm learning more. I'm going through this active process. Then I'm going to skill building, right? So I'm aware. I've learned more. Now I'm going to build some skills, and then I will put those skills into action. And so to make sure that all 4 of those points are part of your allyship if you are going to be consistent in making sure that you are dismantling racism in America.
And I would just like to add one thing that to piggyback both off of what Carrie Joy and Jason spoke of with the isms and all the way to understanding kind of where you sit in some of your internal conflicts and realities before you can really take charge and what that allyship looks like. I always reference that as more checking your implicit bias to know how you are explicitly biased. When you know that their implicit bias is there's those actions that you don't even realize, or you may, but you inadvertently do those things because that's just what you know, what you've been taught, what you've demonstrated, to where then it starts to come out explicitly in how you treat, teach, and interact with other people. And so first being able to address and being able to be clear about, okay, I got some biases I need to address. And as stated earlier, if you can't have that candid conversation and you sit in a place of denial to understand where your thoughts and patterns and beliefs even started from, we got a ways to go. So there has to be some clarity first, as I think in internal transparency, in order to understand how we move forward in that allyship as a whole.
And there's a really good resource just to kind of culminate everything. It's called guide to allyship.com. So if people want to know, where to start, and I think, Jason, you laid it out wonderfully. There's a place that they can go where they can at least know where to start. And how do you take someone else's struggle and make it your own? How do you learn to amplify voices without over speaking or, undervaluing the work that's already been happening? So all of that stuff is at that website. So I found that to be a great source. So it's guide to allyship.com.
I mean, the last thing I'll say too is when we think about dismantling racism and white people in this fight, part of the conversation too has to be your ability to take guidance from Black folks, right? And so that's not something that folks always understand because there is internalized dominance in some of these conversations. But again, as we are thinking about the fullness of the movement then and now. Some of that too is you got to figure out where you fit. And sometimes your fitting is you are a worker bee that is, doing some things and you're active here, you may be passive here. And I think those are things that are important for people to go through the literal work of doing, of unpacking those things and what it means to be in this space. And am I taking up too much room? Do I have something to add in these ways? Or am I just, do I want people to see how great I am, right? And so because I want you to see how great I am here in the front. But again, going through that active work is always important.
And I think, so Carrie Joy had offered a critique of using the term grassroots, right? And so thinking about that, right? Like think about what I mean when somebody brings something up and engages a discussion about something, like what does it mean? What do I need to think about in using that term? How is it that I need to think about things? I think that it becomes like a really good example of like engaging in these conversations in really intentional ways and thinking through, right? Like, should I be saying something differently, right? Like, should I be engaging the conversation from a different lens? How can we learn from each other in these moments? And what does that look like, right? Exhibiting that kind of as we're walking through all of this. And so currently, right, we're seeing a resurgence of some of the same white rage that killed King. So what are some of the ways that we can fight back against that rage? And again, we can think about that locally. We can also think about that nationally, right? But yeah.
There's rage on both sides. Rage is an emotion that probably drives, and I'm gonna speak for myself, the majority of Black women. I've been enraged for years dealing with society and their outlooks of every time I say, like you just talked about, the critique, if I correct a person and say, well, they want to adopt the family. Adopting a family is very insulting to me or to anybody else. If you say, I'm going to adopt your family, you're saying they're enabled, that they need for you to come along and be Captain Savior to take care of their family. So I think part of what we can do to fight the rage is don't get offended with correction. That's part of it. I've listened to some things that Tamika said. I've been listening to meetings too. We've both been like, people get so offended like that. It's like, don't be offended. It's not coming to you for you to be in a space of like, that's all you can get through. Because if you're offended, you're offended. But it's like, you got to work past that. You know what I mean? And understand that all the times the verbiage doesn't come out. So I always tell my kids, don't worry about the way I convey the message, get the message. Because, there's times you yell at your kids and you're like, pick it up. The goal is for you to pick it up. And so I think that dealing with the rage, that would be something that I would like to see happen and change in Delaware, is that when you have strong people of African American descent or any person of color of descent showing you their passion, don't take that as rage, don't take that as anger, take that as this is what it is. If I talk with my hands, if I'm moving my head, whatever I'm doing to convey this message, get the message. And so I think that cuts down a little bit on the rage, because then you're not as offended per se. Now, granted, there are definitely times in conversations and meetings I know that I've had personally in Delaware to where I'm hoping you are offended because your actions and your viewpoints are offensive to me. So let's just go ahead and be offensive then. You know what I mean? So there's different times, but to deal with the rage, I don't know how Caucasian people are going to deal with rage right now. I mean, I don't know. I know that we're not the same generation Martin Luther King was in. And I pray that I pray that we get it under control.
Yeah, Cornel West said, it's amazing that in this country, with all that Black people have endured, we've never formed a group like Al Qaeda. We never have. It's really not our way. We've always seemed to have to make do, and not that that should be the way either. But because we are a creative people, we can take less and make it more, but that shouldn't be the way that we have to operate. But I think moving forward, if we find the like-minded people that are willing to talk together, eat together, sing together, dance together, play together, learn something new together, then we should be able to make legislation together, elect officials together, and start moving this towards a more equitable society for all, even here in Little Delaware.
I was just going to say,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
go ahead, Jason.
I was going to say, I need people to see the connection, right? I need them to see the connection of the rage that assassinated Martin Luther King as connected to the rage of the people who were at the Capitol, right? And so we cannot divorce ourselves from the fact that all of these things are connected. And simply because laws have changed doesn't mean that hearts and minds have changed, right? And so people need to work through some of those things and have real conversations, right? The true work of racial justice for white people is doing it in conjunction with Black folks and people of color, and to do it in white spaces to be able to have those conversations. So for me, I want people to be able to sit down and to really unpack those things and to have full conversations. Have conversations with your children about what's happening and what's going on. Have conversations about how much space that you can take up and the things that you're doing, right? What things do you have in your own life that are white dominance or white supremacy, right? So for me, I think those things I want white people to sit and to find ways to really pull apart, right? And to not think that that was a then and this is a now, to have conversations when we're using language, right? This summer, there was lots of conversations around, well, if things were peaceful, then, I could get on board, right? But that is coded language. And what do we mean by this is a peaceful protest versus not? And so to do some of those things and to really have a real, thoughtful, honest, what am I willing to give up? Am I willing to give up time? Am I willing to give up resource? Am I willing to put my life or body on the line for these things? Am I willing to harbor folks, right? So there are things that are happening. Everybody can't be on the front line of a protest or a movement, but are you sending money? Are you sending food? Are you, we are good at this, thoughts and prayers. Are you actually falling on your knees and praying to anybody, or is thoughts and prayers the end of your thoughts and prayers for me, right? And so for me, I think the rage is something that fuels me as a Black man, right? And so it fuels me in ways that get me out of bed in the morning. I've had to try to find ways that it doesn't burn me up from the inside out. But I think my Black rage is very different from white rage. And so white rage needs to have a conversation about what that looks like. When you were in the boardroom, when you're at the bank, when you're at the bowling alley with your friends, what things are you letting slide? What things are you having a conversation about? Because where we are in this moment in 2021 is not by accident, right? The things that are happening are not by accident. So we can talk about housing or food deserts or insecurity any other way. And we know that that is a clear, conscious, white supremacy, white dominant narrative that is put forward. And so if we are going to do better and be better, we got to have a conversation. And we can't reduce history down to one of the things that makes me want to turn tables is when we think about Martin as a quiet, docile, and Love was this very passive thing. Again, they had to wrestle with, am I going to be nonviolent today, or am I going to do some armed self-defense, right? They are burning this bus. Do I stay on this bus that's burning, or do I get off this bus and fight my way to safety and life after this moment? And so I think those are things that I want people to do if we are going to continue to progress. And I hope if you're watching this, the answer is yes, we want to move forward. And so we're going to take some of these lessons to help us as we move in that journey.
I gotta say this. So finger snaps and hand claps to Jason, because Black people have always been centered as the antagonist, when in fact we are the protagonists, right? So when you think about every movement that we've had to go through, from slavery, through Black codes, through Jim Crow, through, you think about, we have always been inspired to do better, regardless of whatever context that we've been placed in. So I'm going to celebrate and center that rage, and looking at us as the perpetual protagonist, right? Because we are always finding ways to use whatever rage or anger to make the situation better. And like you said, Jason, we use it in ways that are constructive. in ways that empower us, in ways that fuel us to do and to move our collective cause and collective people forward. So I'm gonna choose to see it as Black folks need to center themselves as protagonists, and that's how I choose to see our rage.
Mhm. Through redlining, through gerrymandering, through voter suppression. Yes.
That's good. That's very
Yes.
good. Yeah.
It is. We've excelled through our oppression. We've continuously excelled through our oppression, and
And it's
that's
still
amazing.
happening.
And still happening. Absolutely. So again, it goes back to what we were talking about in the very beginning. You rioting and protesting because you didn't get your way and your entitlement of your white privilege didn't prevail. Our cause and our purpose has always been in trying to survive because our lives were on the line. We were trying to break away and constantly try to break away from a system of oppression to progression. And I think that that's always been our story. And I think that we have to continue to push forward regardless of the ongoing oppression. There's nothing new under the sun. It's just the characters have changed.
And I would like to ask what Smith said when he said the lynching never went away, it's just more publicized. And so that rage for the fact that it's like I said, we've been in this fight for so long. We're generationally in this fight. It's embedded in our blood, our melanin. We're in this. We've been in this. We take on everything of our ancestors. And so the rage for us, we've had to be creative. We didn't formulate all these terrorist groups and these militias that are walking on United States soil. You know, we didn't do that. And so I think, and it's not because we couldn't, you know, even though they look at gangs as militia groups, gangs are not malicious groups. They're the result of something. They're the result of something. So I want to just, you know, yeah, I love everything everybody's had to say. It's awesome. It's awesome.
I think I just want to highlight a few things that y'all said that I think need to be reiterated, which is fragility, right? So the idea that folks need to be able to listen to what folks are saying, take critique, right? Take those moments and then move forward with them versus like crying or pulling back or doing any of those things, right? So thinking about what your fragility looks like in that moment and how it's not helpful at all, right? That those moments aren't helpful at all. And many times what it does is make yourself the victim in that moment when you're not the victim at all, right? Somebody's just literally critiquing the way that you're participating in anti-Blackness or racism or some sort of bias in some way. The fact that because the history is made so palatable by the way that traditional history books are written or the way that history is traditionally taught, right? That what that does is actually harm folks, right? Because folks don't understand clearly the history of all of these moments, right? And if folks did, then maybe we could begin to think about things a little bit differently, right? I think in my classrooms, I always say it's not about the fact that somebody was not included in the history book, but why they weren't included in the history book, right? And so again, going back to somebody like Fannie Lou Hamer, it's because we have to talk about forced sterilization. So we have to talk about Black women being beaten, right? Like it's because we have to talk about those moments that are not palatable, right? And that you can't make palatable in that moment. And so thinking about, not whitewashing history and teaching history the way that it happened, right? So that we can think through these moments more clearly and see how consistent it was. Understand that when you put a photo from the civil rights movement in black and white, that's intentional to make it feel like it was so much longer ago than it actually was, right? And how that harms us when we're thinking about these things. But also the ability to be uncomfortable, right? And so if you are the person in the room full of whiteness, right? And everybody is saying something that is problematic, being okay in pushing back against that, right? Like, so being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And so it may not feel like, the best feeling in the world to push back against your friends or your colleagues or, right, but that you have to, right? Like that's part of allyship. That's part of being, an ally in these moments is speaking out when you're the person in the room who can speak out. And so thinking about what that looks like and being okay with being uncomfortable in those moments, and that you might lose friends, right? Like you might lose colleagues, you might lose all of these things, but that's part of this, right? And so if you're going to recognize your privilege, if you're going to recognize your biases, right, that you need to do that in these really intentional ways and when it feels uncomfortable to do, right? And so, I want us to kind of start thinking about and kind of wrapping up our discussion with something that you think of as self-care, right? So something you do to take care of yourself in these moments, and kind of what gives you joy, right? Because we're really, being an activist, you all have laid out, right, is exhausting. It's traumatic, right? And so how is it that you're able to care for yourself in these moments? What do you think younger folks should be doing, right, to think through self-care with themselves? And then what does provide you joy in these moments?
I will say to start, it's kind of something that was stated earlier about, for me, my faith is my foundation. It definitely does a lot for me on a personal level. I think the second thing is identifying what I call the stability pillars in my life. Those close friends, families, brothers, sisters that I know that I can just let my hair down, and I don't have to put on my superwoman cape today. I can leave it on the bedside and still be able to just be me and just be okay with, what, today I'm tired. I think that leads into the third thing, with your ability to be able to say, I'm not okay. That to me is liberating on so many levels, to be able to say, I'm not okay. I don't feel well. I need somebody to talk to. So as Jason said, I have me a amazing counselor myself that I talk to regularly, have been for quite some time, for the purpose of my own self-care, to have that person to process with, to bounce ideas off of, to cry to whatever it looks like. So I think self-care is intricate to what is best for that individual, because everybody has their own thing that they like. Another thing, through expression, I dance. I've been dancing for 15 years. So there are times where I just need to cut on music and I need to be inspired and I need to choreograph something, and it just releases me. So whatever that thing is, that you feel that a person would feel or identify as just that comfort zone, to be incubated in that. So I think it can take definitely different facets, just depending on the person, but more importantly, being able to say, you know what, I'm not okay, be vulnerable and reach out.
I'm with you on that dance tip. We'll have to do some collaboration.
Yes,
I like to reupholster furniture. I know it was kind of left field, but I love to take something that someone has thrown away and said, this is no longer working, and make it into something beautiful. I tend to give the items away to people who need, food. So I'm still helping, I guess. But reupholstering furniture is something generationally my family's handed down. All the women in my family have been entrepreneurs. And the other thing that, and that's what I do for my peace of mind and my part of my self-care, I'm able to really think, as I'm, because I'm thinking about something else, but for some reason I can solve a lot of problems with redoing a chair. I don't know what it is, but I love redoing furniture. And I think that the other thing, a little bit different, the faith-wise, I lean about my ancestors, and I'm the kind of person that I will burn, my sage and my incense, and I may do a ritual bath or something of that nature to where I need to connect. I love to stand in the grass with barefooted. I like to feel the dirt, the sand. The water is very peaceful for me. I am very good friends with Alum Creek, even though it's not the best place to go, but it is the closest place to go. I love to have sand between my feet. So for me, I have to connect to the earth. I have to ground, and that in meditation, and then I go from there.
I mean, the things that I say to young activists is to find ways to rest and to heal, right? So when we're thinking about the movement, the part of the movement has to be joy and liberation and healing and wellness, and knowing that wellness for Black folks can be different than wellness for other people. And so you have to go through the journey to figure out what being well is for you, and giving yourself permission, right? So I think that is some of the things that I'm working on now, is giving myself permission to rest, right? I'm tired, I'm worn out, I don't want to watch CNN or Fox News or C-SPAN or whatever today, and that's okay, right? And so I think trying to find ways that I can rest are important for me, trying to find ways that I can play. So one of my love languages is time, so to be able to spend time and play is one of the things that in the world of the pandemic has been useful for me, right? So I have a standing Friday night game night with friends, and that is where I can just be. And we talk about social justice stuff, but we also play games. And so that's fun. And then I think, again, the cultivating of community has been important for me, right? So my family are ones who will show up when I need to. I do try to be in touch with the ancestors, right? So before I do stuff, I talk to them and say, here we are, because I have some who are the peace, love, and joy, and I have some who are the peace, be still, right? So again, trying to make sure that the ones who need to lead me today are the ones who are leading and helping in those ways. But again, to try to have conversations with my grandparents. I talked to one of my grandmas today, and I appreciate the fact that I have the ability to tap into that wisdom. And to just have conversations about how she has lived and breathed and survived and thrived and what that means and how those things, how I can bring those things into my existence. And then I think the other thing, or the last two things, is one, really cultivating white people in my life and to have direct conversations to say, if you were going to be white and in my life, here are the ways that I need you to show up. And if you choose not to show up in these ways, that's fine, but that may change the nature of our relationship in these ways, right? And to set very clear boundaries in those ways. And then I think the last thing is I try to nerd out on as much as I can nerd out on, right? But do it in ways my eyes are open. So I have been watching Bridgerton and trying to nerd out in all those good ways. Lovecraft Country is again another one that again I have watched it and now I'm going back through with lesson plans to be able to do some of those things. And then podcasts are another thing, right? So I had a former grad who's like, yeah, when you go to the gym, you should listen to music. I listen to podcasts, and again, it's weird, but some of them make me giggle. And I know people are thinking that I'm listening to music, but I'm actually listening to some podcasts. And so I'll throw out a couple just real quick. Throughline is a good podcast. NPR Code Switch is a great one. Teaching Hard History, Intersectionality Matters with Kimberly Crenshaw, 1619, and then the last one is White Lies, LIES, are all good podcasts. So if you are in need, download any of those in anywhere you can listen to podcasts.
So you all are doing the most. I'm gonna keep mine real simple. I'm not doing all of that. But what I am doing is, so I just got hit, well, not just got hit, but got hip to Esperanza Spalding a couple years ago. And so I actually got a bass guitar. And I'm self-teaching bass right now as a way to have like creative outlet and just kind of like clear thoughts and just focus on one thing. So that's in my jam right now is me and my bass. I do a lot with water. I'm like, here's your, so there's something about water and just like sand and beaches that just do it for me. Mm-hmm. And so just to be in the stillness and the quietness of water, it seems to be just restorative for me and refreshing. So I found myself doing a lot of that. And then I think just napping. I know there's like, I don't know if you all heard the napping ministry. I actually started taking naps. So I'm going to sleep. It's been rejuvenating in so many rewarding ways. And then finally, I do have a therapist. I was not okay, Rochelle, a couple of months ago. I went dark zero, like quiet, and ended up having to get into counseling. And it has been the greatest thing. One of the best decisions I have ever made. So I would encourage you all just to find a reputable counselor, a culturally competent counselor, if you can. You can go through MAC. I think it's Multi-Ethnic Advocates for Cultural Competence or Cultural Care. I'm messing that up, but it's MAC. Inc.net, I believe you can go to that website. So that's what I'm doing for me. And I think that is so powerful to just when you are not okay, like it's okay, and get the help that you need. For those young activists, connect with like-minded people, connect with people who care about the things you care about, and roll with it. Create, a movement amongst you all. So, take care of yourself by just, again, surrounding yourself around people who can help you move forward, whatever the mission or the movement that you're interested in.
So I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for your time. I want to thank you for your presence. I want to thank you for your knowledge. I want to thank you for the work that you all do every single day. And I want to thank you all for letting me be a part of the discussion and have a space here with you all. So I truly appreciate all of the work that you're doing. And we are going to provide some email addresses and some websites and some resources. So for folks who have watched the talk and want to engage spaces and people and do good work. And so I think that anybody who's watching this and makes connections with any of the individuals who were on this panel are going to be in a really good space to do work, to take critique, right, to learn, and to help folks move forward in these moments. So thank you all for being here today. I truly do appreciate your presence and your knowledge. Thank you.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing voice house the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun, a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
Our benediction. Thank you, God, for the discussion on today. Empower us to be active participants in advancing equality. Empower us to see humanity in all people. Empower us to be merciful to all people as you have been merciful unto us. Help us to walk in a spirit of love. Help us to continue the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Let us continue to work until that day comes when Dr. King's dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Let us work until this dream becomes a reality for all people. To the only wise God, our Savior, be glory, majesty, dominion, and power, both now and forever. Amen.